The Indianapolis Colts finished the 2023 season with a 9-8 record and missed the playoffs for the third straight year. Despite missing the playoffs, it was a really solid year for them, all things considered. They had their rookie quarterback go down early in the year, and anytime a team has their number one quarterback go down, especially early on, well, more often than not, it's a death sentence. But even when the Colts' backs were against the wall with a 3-5 record entering Week 9, their confidence never wavered. They won 6 of their final 9 games and were a Week 18 loss against the Texans away from making the playoffs, all with a backup quarterback. What gets lost within the 2023 Colts season is they still finished 10th in points per game with a backup quarterback for most of the year. And this is a big reason why I'm so high on Anthony Richardson and the Colts entering 2024. They have a good running back, a good trio of receivers, a good offensive line, and to me, one of the most underrated coaches in the entire NFL. And as long as the defense can be serviceable and not finish in the bottom 5 of the NFL in points allowed per game like they did last year, well, the Indianapolis Colts are going to be a problem. And we're going to break everything down in today's video. Now let's begin. The Indianapolis Colts overachieved in the 2023 season in a lot of ways. Their over-under for wins before the season started was just 6.5, which they demolished as they finished with 9 wins. They had a receiver go for over 1,100 yards in Michael Pittman, and a rookie play pretty well in Josh Downs, and they had every reason to quit several times throughout the 2023 season. But they never did, and they kept fighting. And when you look at several of the losses the Colts suffered throughout last year, like the Saints game, like the Bengals game, or like the Falcons game, they gave up an enormous amount of points to teams that you wouldn't think would have beat Indy in the manner they did when these teams played. I mean, these games were all double-digit losses for the Colts, and the loss in Cincinnati was particularly bad as they were beat by 20 points on the road. And that was also in a game where Indy could have improved to 8-5, yet fell to 7-6. And there's a big difference between 8-5 and 7-6 in the middle of December. But even with those few frustrating losses throughout the year, they still managed to have a winning record, and for where they were in Week 18 to where they are now, well, I thought the Colts improved quite a bit this offseason with what their goals were. A lot of the Colts' prioritization this offseason was to keep guys in-house, and they did, as they brought back guys like Grover Stewart, Kenny Moore, Tyquan Lewis, who quietly had a really productive year for the Colts last year, and even Julian Blackmon. And there's a reason they wanted to bring a lot of guys back, because individually, the Colts have a lot of good players on this defense. And they had 4 guys on the team have 8 or more sacks last year, which was huge, and believe it or not, the Colts finished 5th in the NFL in sacks as a team with 51 on the year. I am a big fan of the Colts defensive line and very much think how this unit plays in 2024 is more or less how their season will go defensively. DeForest Buckner is one of the best defensive linemen in all of football, and he has 50 or more pressures in 3 of his 4 years in Indy. But aside from Buckner and Grover Stewart in the middle, they also have Samson Ebukam on edge, who came over from the 49ers during the 2023 offseason. And in his first year with the team, Ebukam played really well for the Colts and had nearly 50 pressures, along with a team-leading 9.5 sacks. He also had 17 quarterback hits and 10 tackles for a loss, and overall, this was a tremendous signing for Indy, and I give a huge tip of the cap to Chris Ballard for making this move. Ebukam signed a 3-year, $24 million contract last offseason, with nearly 11 of it being guaranteed, and anytime a player signs a contract like that, it's not only a low-risk, high-reward signing for the team, but if in the scenario the player does not work out, well, the team can release them without suffering too much of a financial hit in the process. But Ebukam played great in his first year with the Colts, and I would expect much of the same in 2024 too. And what's especially critical for not just the Colts, but for every other team in this division, is you have to get after the quarterback, and often. And having 3 players register 40 or more pressures last year like they did was huge. The 3, of course, were Ebukam, Buckner, and Tyquan Lewis. And teams that have a good pass rush don't just have one player. They have multiple guys who can get after the quarterback, which, again, in the vaunted AFC, is a prerequisite for any sort of team success. The other starting defensive lineman for the Colts is Kwity Paye, their 2021 first-round pick from Michigan. Kwity is not a typical NFL pass rusher, and while that may sound bad initially, it's really not. He's just a very unique player. Kwity is very stout in the run game, which is a huge plus, by the way, but I have concerns with him as a long-term option for the Colts. Now, I know they opted to pick up his fifth-year option, and I know he is on the team through the 2025 season, but I think there's also a reason they selected Laiatu Latu in the first round of the draft this year. And I really think it's because they believe Latu is a better pass-rushing option now than Kwity is entering year 4. We will break down Latu more during the rookie impact part of the video, but the point is, the Colts have one of my favorite front fours in all of football, and they are very solid up front. What may surprise you is despite the Colts finishing 28th in points allowed per game last year, is they were pretty solid on a down-to-down basis against the run. They finished 10th in yards per carry as a defense last year, but finished 24th in rushing yards allowed as a team. And I know that may seem contradicting to say they were good stopping the run on a down-to-down basis, but they finished 31st in rushing attempts against, meaning they had a positive difference in rushing attempts against and rushing yards allowed. It would be bad if a team had the opposite, where teams did not run the ball as much against them, but were absolutely gashing them when they did, which would be a negative difference. One of the biggest reasons we bring this up is because I think that's going to change in a big way in 2024, is how teams choose to attack the Colts. During the months leading up to the draft, I mocked the Colts a corner in several mock drafts, most notably Toledo's Quinyon Mitchell, because I thought corner was the number one need for this team entering the 2024 draft. As we know now, they of course went with Latu in the first round, and there was even a viral video of Chris Ballard laughing in joy, saying we got the best pass rusher in the draft. This point isn't to scold the Latu pick, because again, I loved the selection, and I think he is in a very, very good situation to succeed, but the Colts corners aren't exactly great heading into the season. Their top 3 corners are second-year players Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, and of course, veteran Kenny Moore. And there was a reason the Colts were continuously mocked corners all throughout the draft process. Needless to say, I was surprised they didn't address the corner position until late on day 3 of the 2024 draft. I think that will inevitably lead to teams putting up a lot of points on Indy throughout the 2024 season, especially when they play teams like the Texans, Bills, and Dolphins, all of which like to throw the football. Now, to be clear, I'm not going to scold the Colts or be disappointed they walked out of the 2024 draft with Latu and receiver A.D. Mitchell, but I do worry about their corner depth for the upcoming season, and I would imagine most Colts fans feel the same way. Placing all of your faith in a second round and a 7th round corner from last year is very risky, which is a tremendous understatement. I know defensive coordinator Gus Bradley will play a lot of cover 3, and that's who he is as a play caller, but the Colts are going to need their front 7 to really get after the quarterback this year. Linebacker Zaire Franklin has back-to-back seasons with over 160 tackles, and I expect him to be a beneficiary of the good defensive line play this year from a run game standpoint, meaning Defo, Grover, and the gang take up blocks and play their gap, which would then allow Franklin to stop running backs before they can hit the hole for a big gain. The biggest thing with the 2024 Colts defense is they can't flat out lose games for the team like they did at times throughout the 2023 season. I know Colts fans were upset with officiating in the Browns game specifically, but they did lose other games by double digits in which opposing teams put up 30 or more points, and they lost 4 of those games to be exact. And if the Colts defense can play even a little bit better with how good I think the offense will be throughout the 2024 season, then I really think this team can win a lot of games. As for the Colts offense entering 2024, I don't know how you can be anything but optimistic for this team. This was a team in 2023 that finished top 10 in points per game with a backup quarterback playing for most of the year. Jonathan Taylor, I think, will bounce back, and Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson only played one game together, which was the Titans game, and ultimately a game Anthony Richardson left early. So when you factor in all of these things, a good running back, a good trio of receivers, a tight end who I think is a tad underrated in Jelani Woods, and a good offensive line, to me, I think that's going to be a recipe for success. Oh, and the fact that they have a really good play caller in Shane Steichen. Now, I really like Michael Pittman. He went for over 1,100 yards last year, and as long as Anthony Richardson is competent as a quarterback this year, which I more than think he will be, I would be pretty surprised if Pittman doesn't have another 1,000-yard year. Lost within all of the success the 2023 rookies had, whether it was CJ Stroud, Puka Nacua, Jahmyr Gibbs, hell, even division rival Tank Dell. People forget Josh Downs still went for over 700 yards as a rookie, and they also added A.D. Mitchell in the second round, who I thought was one of the better value picks in all of the 2024 draft. The Colts walked out of the 2024 draft with a top 20 player on my board in Latu, and the wide receiver 5 in this class in Mitchell, who I also had as a top 25 player in this class. Chris Ballard did a phenomenal job of letting the board come to him and still acquiring a great player in Mitchell without having to mortgage or sacrifice future draft capital for a falling draft pick. The Colts offense in 2024 is going to be incredibly fun because when you break it down, really, what weakness do they have? If you want to nitpick and say Michael Pittman isn't a top 3 or top 4 receiver in the NFL, go for it, be my guest, but does that really matter in the grand scheme of things when they have one of, if not the most athletic quarterback to ever play the position, or when they have a good running back, or when they have a good offensive line along with it? To me, the answer is no. And again, this is coming off of a year in which they had to pivot, in which they had to audible a lot, because obviously Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew do not have anywhere close to the same skill set. So for Shane Steichen as a play caller to be able to audible from Anthony Richardson to Gardner Minshew and still have this offense finished in 10th in points per game last year, I don't know how you can't be anything but optimistic for the Colts heading into this year and to project them as one of the best offenses in the league entering 2024. The reality with the 2024 Colts is whether you think Anthony Richardson is going to be a perennial Pro Bowler and a guy that's going to be an MVP candidate for years, or whether you think he's going to be a big draft bust, nobody knows. He threw just 84 passes last year and completed over 59% of those passes. For me personally, there's only one, maybe two guys every offseason that I am truly willing to buy in and to go all in on, and this year it's Anthony Richardson. When you factor in the good run game the Colts have, led by Jonathan Taylor, who I do believe will be back, a good receiving trio led by Michael Pittman, an underrated tight end to me personally in Jelani Woods, a good offensive line, and a good head coach that, again, which cannot be underemphasized, finished 10th in points per game with a backup quarterback for most of the year. I mean, unless Anthony Richardson is a monumental draft bust and a guy that simply cannot hit the broadside of a barn, I refuse to believe with his athleticism that he's not going to be at minimum a serviceable quarterback for not just the 2024 season, but for over the next few years. Now, if I had to project a statistical stat line for Richardson in 2024, I think he'll be around 3,500 yards with 22 or 23 passing touchdowns, with another 700 or 800 yards on the ground and another 7 or 8 rushing touchdowns. I also don't think it's out of the question for him to have double-digit rushing touchdowns, because remember, Shane Steichen came from Philly, and what is emphasized there? Of course, the tush push. Now, with leverage and Richardson being taller than Jalen Hurts, the tush push probably wouldn't be as easy, but you can also make the argument that with Richardson's strength, that he could easily get behind Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson and just push his way into the end zone. So, for me, I think a 35 total touchdown season is not out of the equation for Anthony Richardson in 2024. Overall, I was a really big fan of what the Colts did in the 2024 draft. Now, I don't know if I agree with Chris Ballard that Latu was the best pass rusher in the draft, but what I will say for Latu is I absolutely love the situation he's entering in year one. The reality is no team is going to say entering the week, you know what? We're going to send our right tackle and have our tight end chip Latu and even our running back chip Latu every single play, and we're going to leave DeForest Buckner one-on-one. That is not going to happen. Now, could Latu receive chips this year? Of course, yes, but it's not going to be as often as you think. Not only that, but Samson Ebukam is also a solid pass rusher on the other side, and Grover Stewart can more than hold his own on the interior, and I really like the situation Latu is entering this year. I think he can easily have a 45 or even 50 pressure year in year number 1, along with 6 or 7 sacks. I don't think Defensive Rookie of the Year is entirely out of the question for him either. Now, for A.D. Mitchell, their second round pick, I absolutely loved the value here, and I think A.D. will have anywhere from 600 to 800 yards as a rookie, not because he can't produce more, but you have to remember when predicting stat lines for rookies, especially second round receivers, that there's a lot of other mouths to feed in the same offense. So think about how many times Anthony Richardson's going to carry the football, how many times JT's going to get the football, and then of course Michael Pittman and Josh Downs too. AD will absolutely have a role this year, and I can't wait to see how he plays in this offense, and I really can't wait to see how Shane Steichen utilizes him. Now, for some of the other picks the Colts had, I really liked Matt Goncalves from Pitt, and I thought he was a really good swing tackle, and I think a 6th offensive lineman in today's NFL with the 17th game, and with what could potentially be an 18th game a couple of years from now, I think having a viable 6th offensive lineman is invaluable in today's NFL. I also like the selection of Tanner Bortolini as a depth piece in the 4th round, and honestly a player that the Colts, at least a lot of people don't talk about with the Colts draft, is Oregon State receiver Anthony Gould. Now, I don't expect Gould to have 50 or 60 receptions as a rookie because, like we said with A.D. Mitchell, who I think is a better player than Anthony Gould, there's a lot of mouths to feed in the offense, but I think Anthony Gould will be a solid contributor in what he does for the Colts this year. Overall, I really like the Colts 2024 class, and it of course is highlighted by pass rusher Laiatu Latu, and to me, one of the bigger steals on day 2 in Texas receiver Adonai Mitchell. Pertaining to the 2024 Colts schedule, yes, they're going to have difficult games like everybody does, but their schedule honestly isn't as bad as you may think. They play teams like the Packers, Bills, Jets, and Lions, but fortunately for Indy, they play the Bills, Jets, and Lions all at home, and their schedule could be a lot worse than what it actually is. Now, unlike a few other teams in the NFL, I don't think there's going to be any game this year before it starts where you say, you know what, we're going to write the Colts off. They don't stand any sort of chance in this game. And they also have a very big beneficial part of their schedule that not a lot of other teams have, and that is a very late bye, as their bye is in week 14. And even coming out of their week 14 bye, they play at Denver versus the Titans, at the Giants, and versus the Jags to end the season. Now, it would be ignorant for me to sit here in July and say that the Colts are going to go 4-0 off of their week 14 bye, but I do want to put it out there that that is, well, realistic for them this year. Are they going to? I mean, probably not, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Colts go 3-1 or 4-0 and enter the playoffs hot. And if you have a team that's hot entering the postseason, that is a team nobody wants to play. Yes, they're going to be battle tested all throughout the 2024 regular season, and their schedule to start the year is not a picnic by any means. They start the year home against the Texans, then go to Green Bay, then come home to play Chicago in their first 3 games. I don't think they'll start out 0-3 by any means, but a 1-2 start wouldn't surprise me either. For the Colts 2024 season, the ceiling for them is very difficult to project because ultimately it depends how much you believe in Anthony Richardson. I believe in him a lot, but I think their ceiling this year is going to be a divisional round loss. I think they can win 10, maybe even 11 games, but anything can happen in January, and we know that. And honestly, for a lot of the AFC teams, not just the Colts, it's going to depend on a lot on how the seedings play out. But I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 39% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.